Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the deeply paradoxical story of the man who literally forged a unified China out of centuries of bloody warfare. We're talking about Qin Shi Huang. And guys, his life is just this staggering tale of ruthless ambition, mind-boggling engineering, and as you'll see, some ultimate historical irony.
So here's the central mystery we're tackling today. How exactly does a ruler whose dynasty was engineered to last for 10,000 generations build a system that collapses almost immediately after he dies? It's wild, right? Well, to figure that out, we've got to rewind and look at exactly how he brought a completely fractured world to its knees. Which brings us, Chapter 1, Forging a Unified China. So Yingzheng starts out as a royal hostage, but he ascends to become a king with an absolute obsession with conquest. And the sheer speed of his campaigns, it's basically an ancient blitzkrieg. Think about this. In 230 BC, the state of Han falls. Barely 2 years later, the Zhou capital is captured. Fast forward to 225 BC, and the state of Wei is literally flooded into surrendering. Chu goes down in 223, and then finally, Qi just throws in the towel without a fight in 221 BC. It's this incredibly rapid, domino-like collapse of independent states. In less than a decade, all Chinese lands were unified under Qin control. Okay, so now the known world is conquered. And for King Zheng, being called just a king suddenly doesn't cut it anymore. He decides to elevate himself way above mere feudal rulers by inventing a completely new title, Huangdi. He took the Huang from the mythical 3 sovereigns and the Di from the 5 emperors of ancient folklore. By mashing these together, he's appropriating all that divine prestige, essentially declaring himself the unparalleled, godlike first emperor of China. And this is where we really see his administrative genius kick in, working alongside his prime minister, Li Si. Before unification, these states were a total mess. You had diverse currencies, different regional scripts, varying systems of measurement. But after, they abolished the old feudal systems and standardized absolutely everything. We're talking a universal Banlung coin, a single standardized script, and, get this, they even mandated the exact width of wagon axles. Think about it. Imagine trying to drive on a national highway where every car needed a totally different lane width. It'd be chaos. By standardizing the axles, carts could seamlessly travel down his massive newly carved network of national roads. Moving on to Section 2, Engineering and Empire. Now, stepping into his role as the builder, the emperor had this monumental physical vision that permanently altered the literal landscape of the earth. And the scale we're talking about here is just staggering. To prevent any future rebellions, he confiscated all the bronze weapons from the states he'd just conquered. But he didn't just lock them up in a vault somewhere. No, he melted them all down and cast them into 12 metal colossi, these massive statues for his palace. And get this, each one weighed an estimated 70 tons. That is just an unbelievable flex of power. But the vision went way beyond his palace walls. He mobilized hundreds of thousands of workers for some truly unprecedented public works. He ordered his men to connect all the older, disparate state walls into what would eventually become the precursor to the Great Wall of China. And this was done on a brutal, sweeping build-and-move-on principle. On top of that, he built the 34-kilometer Lingua Canal, which connected major waterways to speed up military transport, all alongside that massive national road system we mentioned earlier. Which leads us into the darker side of his reign, in Section 3. Paranoia and purges. See, maintaining this colossal, newly forged empire required an absolute, frankly terrifying level of control over the population. Before this, China actually had a golden age of free thought known as the 100 Schools of Thought. Well, that was completely eliminated, gone. In its place, legalism became the one and only acceptable philosophy in the Qin dynasty. Now, legalism wasn't about ethics or morals. It was a strict, mandatory state ideology that enforced absolute, unquestioning obedience to the law and ultimately to the emperor himself. And this desperate need for control culminated in one of history's most infamous cultural purges. In 213 BC, the emperor wanted to stop scholars from comparing his reign favorably to the past. So what does he do? He orders the burning of pretty much all existing books. The only exceptions were highly practical texts on things like agriculture, medicine, and divination. Everything else went up in flames. And it gets worse. The very next year, historical records allege he brutally executed 460 scholars by literally burying them alive, just for possessing forbidden knowledge. Now, as you can probably guess, this kind of brutal suppression bred some incredibly deep resentment. So the emperor's growing paranoia, it was actually entirely justified. Take this crazy story, for example. During an imperial tour, an aristocratic rebel named Zhang Li hires an incredibly strong assassin to ambush the emperor. This guy hurls a massive 160-pound metal cone off a mountaintop directly at the royal carriage. It completely shatters the thing into pieces. But the emperor actually survives because he was secretly traveling in a decoy carriage. All of this fear brings us to Section 4, the quest for immortality.
As the emperor grew older, he entered this desperate and deeply ironic battle against the one enemy his massive armies just couldn't conquer: death itself. He became completely obsessed with living forever. He's heavily funding these fraudulent alchemists to brew him elixirs of life. He famously sends out an explorer named Zhu Fu, along with a fleet of ships and hundreds of youths, to find the mythical immortal Mount Penglai. Spoiler alert, they never came back. He even built hidden tunnels connecting over 200 of his palaces, just so he could travel completely unseen and evade evil spirits. But the ultimate tragedy here? It's highly likely those elixirs his trusted alchemists were feeding him were loaded with mercury, meaning his quest for immortality was actually slowly poisoning him to death.
But just in case he couldn't hack the whole immortality thing, his preparations for the afterlife were totally unparalleled. At Mount Li, he ordered the construction of a massive, city-sized mausoleum, and guarding it, an estimated 6,000 unique, life-sized terracotta soldiers. It's just a phenomenal archaeological wonder. Ancient historical records even claim the tomb itself features a simulated landscape flowing with 100 rivers of liquid mercury.
And, all this paranoia eventually builds up into this macabre, almost unbelievable comedy of errors. When the emperor finally did die during a summer tour in 210 BC, his chancellor, Li Si, completely panics. So here is their wild 3-step plan. Step 1, hide the death from everyone to prevent a massive uprising. Step 2, since it's the middle of summer and the emperor's body is naturally starting to decompose, they secretly surround his wagon with carts full of rotting fish, literally just to mask the smell. And step 3, they forge a letter in the dead emperor's name ordering his rightful heir, Fusu, to commit suicide. That cleared the way for them to install their own easily controlled puppet emperor.
And that brings us to our final chapter, Section 5, the Emperor's Legacy. Now, that puppet regime they installed, it collapsed just a few short years later, entirely wiping out the Qin dynasty. So for over 2 millennia, historians have fiercely debated how to judge this monumental yet incredibly brutal reign. For most of Chinese history, the traditional Confucian perspective really condemned him. This is perfectly captured by the Han Dynasty poet Jia Yi. The standard view was that Qin Shi Huang was a brutal tyrant, and his empire fell not because of outside invaders, but due to its own internal moral rot. The consensus was basically, yes, he seized power brilliantly, but he entirely lacked the humaneness and virtue actually needed to preserve it. However, if we jump forward to the 20th century, a very different Marxist reevaluation emerged. Figures like Mao Zedong actually openly praised Qin Shi Huang's uncompromising centralization. From this perspective, the destruction of the old feudal order and even the harsh suppression of dissident scholars were viewed as necessary, perhaps even admirable steps required to tear down the old world and build a unified, strong state. It's a stark contrast in how history remembers him. All of this leaves us with a really provocative final thought to consider. Does the forge of a unified, eternal nation always require the fire of a brittle and paranoid tyranny? I mean, think about it. Qin Shi Huang gave China its name, its walls, its national roads, and its universal script. But at the end of the day, he died in utter fear. His body was hidden behind a literal wall of rotting fish, and his supposed 10,000 generation dynasty crumbled almost instantly. It is an absolutely profound historical paradox. I really hope this look into his life leaves you wanting to dive even deeper into the incredible complexities of our history. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.